We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
That's complicated.
in that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, gather around for another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. And, we've been around for a long time here at Lions of Liberty. Years and years. I lose track of how long I've had this podcast for. I think it's almost 6 years, and Mark is 2 or 3 years more than that, and Brian happened a year or two after me. I don't know. We have a lot of podcasts, and we have the oldest and the best and the greatest variety show here in Libertarian podcast land. There's a lot of great Libertarian podcasts, but this is the only one where you get the hard-hitting interviews and the debates and the long hair and all that stuff you get with Mark Claire on Mondays with the flagship program. And on Wednesday, you get Brian McWilliams and the sarcasm and the mispronouncing words and the hilarity and the cursing, and that's what you get on Wednesday on Electric Liberty Land. And here on Friday, you get hard-hitting interviews. We're talking to people who've been through the ringer of life. Or like today, you get maybe a little more casual interview with a friend of mine from the Year Zero podcast, Tommy Salmons. And it's a great conversation, wide-ranging conversation. You guys are going to love it. But before I get to that, we have these 3 shows. You guys love the shows. You're listening. Please, I think they call it follow now on iTunes. So follow or subscribe or do whatever the heck you do to get this show delivered to your friggin' phone every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And give us a comment. Give us one of those 5-star ratings. That shit really, really helps out with the algorithms and puts the podcast in front of more eyeballs. So we appreciate that. Appreciate you guys listening and supporting us on Patreon and all that other good stuff. If you do want to become a Patreon supporter and get all the perks that we have, the bonus content, the merchandise, the influence in the show, you can go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. And with that being said, guys, here's the show. My guest here on Finding Freedom is Tommy Salmons. Tommy is the host of the Year Zero podcast, the Year podcast, if you're saying it backwards or something weird. It's you can find it over there at the with the group of podcasts, all great podcasts at the Libertarian Institute. It focuses on power, the abuse of power, finding liberty in your own life. And Tommy, welcome to Find Your Freedom.
Hey, what's going on, man? I'm happy to be here.
And I can't go any farther without saying what just happened. We just had a great 15-minute conversation, and I didn't record it. So no one's ever going to get to hear that. So we got to make the next 15 minutes or hour, whatever it is, to make up for it. But I mean, I'll try to recreate the conversation, but it's never the same. So we, Tommy, obviously you're sitting in your truck right now. And for some reason, I've met, 10, 20 libertarian truck drivers. I know Reed Coverdale, who's like this new libertarian podcasting machine that's come out of nowhere. He's a truck driver. Rocky Fahrenberg, who's done a lot of great stuff. He's a truck driver. One of our longtime supporters, Anthony Meyer, he's a truck driver. So why is it that there are so many libertarian truck drivers?
Again, I think it's the mindset. I think trucking attracts a certain type of mindset, a type of person that is willing to be extremely independent. They don't want to be micromanaged. They don't want to be dependent on anybody else. They are always within their own head. They spend a lot of time thinking and contemplating on what's going on. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent in a truck in silence, just driving and thinking and just trying to process and clear out things. So I think it's really that reflective and independent spirit that you get when you find the type of person that is attracted to trucking and sticks with it.
So obviously listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, thinking, how much caffeine do you consume when you're doing all that stuff?
I drink 48 ounces of coffee every morning.
And that's it? Nothing else the rest of the day?
I'll sip on a Coke, but a Coke, like a 20-ounce Coke, will last me like 2 days.
Yeah.
And then water. I keep a big old 1-gallon bottle of water in here for me and my dog. So.
And what's your typical schedule when you're out driving? Is it how many hours on and then how many hours off?
Well, the clock is set weird, and it's kind of hard to explain to people that have never looked at it. But basically, we have a 14-hour workday. Okay, from the time that we log on in the morning, we have 11 hours to drive within that 14-hour period, right? So if I log on at 8 o'clock in the morning, then before 10 o'clock at night, I have to stop driving, and I can't drive more than 11 hours in that period. Then I have to take a 10-hour break. So if you're running a straight, like, let's say I'm driving 10 hours today and I'll stop with an hour left on my clock. I take a 10-hour break, and then I drive 10 hours the next day. You end up on a rotating clock. So when you get to my age and you've been driving for 18 years the way I have, your body starts kicking you in the ass and telling you it doesn't want to do that anymore. So I try to get 12 hours off if I can.
I heard you mention in one of your recent podcasts that you're considering a career change. Maybe is that you're trying to get back home? Is that something you're trying to do in the near term, or is that more a long-term thing?
As soon as possible. Yeah. Okay. So my wife is from South Africa, and she moved here 6 years ago to marry me. And I immediately got in a truck and left her at the house by herself.
You could have been on 90 Day Fiance.
So we're trying to, we've been constantly trying to expand her business to a point to where I can be assisting her and working from home. Mm-hmm. And therefore I'll be tending, because we have 8 3/4 acres. So I'll be tending to the yard. I'll be podcasting. I'll start writing more for the Institute, hopefully a couple of articles every week. And then I will also be assisting her in her work. But we have to supplement my income. I mean, that's basically what it boils down. So if anybody is looking for administrative work, my wife is looking for more clients. So
what type of administrative work? Not to spend the whole podcast talking about this, but I mean, since something you're looking for, see if we can help. Maybe you can find somebody.
Yeah. She does. She did transcripts for the Monopoly on Violence documentary for Pete, helped out with that. She worked on the Jacob Hornberger campaign and handled all his emails and scheduled all his podcast appearances. Right now she basically runs a landscaping business. She does all the QuickBooks, paychecks, all the emails, scheduling, setting up the entire schedule for their busy season. She works with a lady who manages a daycare and does some of the administrative work for her. And then her other client is a scuba diver instructor in Florida that she works with. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Dude, I'm all for helping people to, take control of your income, take control of your life. I'm trying to do it myself. I'm trying to get out of corporate America within the next year or so. And same thing, just finding ways to supplement the income, because you got to replace it. I mean, you can make the leap, but then, and honestly, sometimes it's necessary to make that leap because you need that pressure on yourself in order to, really make it happen. Not that I'd advise everyone to do that. But in fact,
I have child support and a mortgage, so I got to make sure those are paid. At the very least, that's got to be taken care of.
Yeah, well, it's good to know what your floor is, what you got to be at. Yeah. But when we had our long conversation at the beginning here that I forgot to record, we had a big love fest talking about Scott Horton and how great he is. And I didn't know that he was your first interview with the Year Zero podcast. So let's do this. Tell us about the reason why you started the podcast, and then, talk about Scott and the Libertarian Institute and how you got in with those guys.
Yeah. Well, the podcast wasn't called Year Zero at first. It was actually called Stranger Encounters. And I had read Harry Brown's book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. And then I had a lot of friends that I was involved with online that were entrepreneurs. Kylan Ganger used to have a podcast called Successful Dropouts, talking about how he dropped out of college and created his own independent wealth. And then he would interview high school dropouts, college dropouts, whatever, and that had left school to become entrepreneurs. And I was just getting into libertarianism fairly in depth, and I'm trying to tie together, like, how does the philosophy of liberty, like, tie in to actual entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is the ultimate liberty in life. And so I was balancing these ideas, and I had been listening to Scott Horton, and I just thought, I love this guy. I love his podcast. I love how he approaches subjects. I want to interview him. So I emailed him before I even had a podcast, like saying, hey, I'm going to start a podcast in 3 weeks. Do you want to be, can I interview you? And he was, yeah, sure. And so it all kind of launched from there. So I interviewed him and Pete, first of all. Those were my first two interviews. And I guess this was when Pete was around, I don't know, it's 2018. I think he was around 85 or 90 podcasts at the time. He hadn't had his podcast very long. And
so I interviewed him. Still Mance back then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, he was. And I interviewed both of them. And then I was listening to Scott one time, and he gave a challenge that he wanted an anti-war article for the Libertarian Institute attacking the right from the right. So I was like, well, I think I can do that. I love to write. I've been writing since I was like 12 years old. I love to write. So I was like, well, let me give it a shot. So I put down a draft and kind of read over it, and I was like, I think that's pretty good. And I sent it in to him, and he emailed me like an hour later, was like, call me. I love this. There's just a couple of things I want to talk to you about. I was like, all right, cool. And I looked at my wife, and I was like, holy shit, I got Scott Horton's phone number. Like, I'm going to frame this, And so I called Scott, and I spent, hours on the phone. You know how Scott is. We spent hours on the phone talking about my article and all kinds of different stuff. And that next day I sat down with that article. I had taken notes on everything he wanted done. I sat down with the article. I redrafted it, sent it in to him. He emailed me back, and the way only Scott Horton responds to emails or texts, perfect. And just the next thing I know, it's published. And and the craziest thing, it was sandwiched between Lou Rockwell and Ron Paul. And I was like, wow. I don't belong here. What the hell is happening? I do not belong here. Yeah. Like I was like, no one's going to read my article. They're going to see Lou Rockwell, some schmuck, Ron Paul. They're going to skip right over everything I have to say. So
hey,
I was like,
it's all about who you can associate your name with. So that's
right. Yeah.
Stuff.
So then I interviewed Scott probably 3 or 4 more times, wrote another article for the Institute, maybe 2 more articles. And then I met him in the summer of 2019, and he added me to the blog. We hung out, went out on his boat, had a good time. He was really gracious. My wife and I had gone to Austin for a concert, and he insisted I contact him. And, so he took time off to take us out and go hang out, brought us to eat and all that good jazz. Had a great time with Scott. And, he's just the most amazing person I've ever met. He's such a great guy. He's such a wonderful dude. I love Scott to death. And I was telling you before, when the COVID restrictions hit, whenever all this crazy stuff was going on, he knew I was out on the road. You know, he was texting me and asking me, "Hey, are you doing okay? Is everything all right? How are they treating you out there?" And like, nobody outside of like my mom did that, you know? So that was like, it was really interesting. Like, wow, this guy like really cares about me, you know, like we've just become really close friends, I feel.
Yeah, Scott, I mean, he is one of the most down-to-earth guys that I've met who has that big of an audience. Like, everybody in the Liberty movement knows Scott Horton. But when you meet Scott Horton, I mean, he doesn't have an ego. That's the best way to put it. I sense zero ego with Scott Horton, which is saying a lot, because it's hard not to have an ego when you get a following, even a small following. I've seen it happen to lots of people. And he, like you were saying, like he'll talk to almost anybody. He'll take an interview with anybody. He gives his time so freely and genuinely. And,
I'm sorry, you just made me think. The last podcast he did with Dave Smith is Dave Smith is like, my podcast was so small in the beginning, you don't even remember doing it. And Scott goes, "Do you know how many interviews I've done?" And Dave goes, "I know. You never turn down a podcast request." And he goes, "Of course. Like, why would I? I have the opportunity to expose my message to somebody who may not have ever heard my message before." You know, that's like the way he looks at it. And I love that about him. I love that about Scott. He's so passionate about the message. His ego is the last thing on his mind.
Well, yeah, he's a guy, and I mean, not to do the whole podcast just talking about Scott Horton, but I think this is a bigger point. I mean, I think people can kind of model themselves in his mold, in that, you know, I don't see Scott as someone who's he's not looking to gain power in this. He's just looking to get the message out. And I think we could all learn from this when we are taking podcast appearances. You know, and I've done this in the past. Maybe someone asked you to come on their show, and it's a really small show with only, you know, a couple listeners, you know, a few listeners. It's still important. I mean, if a podcast has 50 listeners, 25 listeners, that's still 25 people that can hear the message of liberty, that can hear your message, and that could be, you know, brought into this movement. And who knows what they can do? You know, you plant a seed in their mind, and who knows what it's going to turn into. And with podcasting, I feel like I talk to so many people who have a podcast and they start one, then they get frustrated because they don't turn into Tom Woods right away or Scott Horton right away. And it's like, if you just imagine when you look at your downloads, whatever it is, maybe it's 20 people, maybe it's 100 people, maybe it's 5,000 people. Just imagine those people in a room, and you walk into the room and you're talking to all those people. I mean, that's powerful. And I think more people need to think of podcasting as a means to communicate and a means to really get this message out there, rather than like a way to make a profit. Because to be perfectly honest, a lot of podcasters, the vast majority of podcasters, you're not going to make a profit. So you better be talking about and podcasting about something that you're passionate about.
Yeah, well, and I think it helps too that people like you or I mean, you've been at it longer than I have. I started in 2018 and I've been grinding, you know, and I've made all the mistakes you can make, and I've had to figure all of it out here, you know, over and over and over again. Learn as soon as I get one thing figured out, I got another thing I got to deal with. And, you know, and I've watched my numbers go from, you know, 60 downloads up to 2,000 downloads, then drop back down to 300 downloads, and then jump back. And you're like, it's not consistent. It's always, you're always grinding. You're always moving. You're always trying to adjust. You're always trying to learn. And I would never discourage anybody from starting a podcast, but don't start a podcast because you think you're going to make money. Yeah, that's absolutely insane. Don't do that. You have to be talking to people about subjects that you find interesting before anybody else is going to be attracted to your podcast.
100% agree with that. So let's continue down that path. I do want to talk about Childerberg. We'll come back to that later. But, you know, talking about interesting topics, And I know your podcast, wide range of topics. You interviewed me, so I'm a wide range of topics myself. But you bring on a lot of different characters. The one I listened to recently, what's the name of the podcast? It was God. It was the guy that it's like a music podcast with like I haven't listened to it.
Oh, you're talking about David Sanchez, the lead vocalist of Havoc?
No. Oh well. Anyway, it was the point is you have a wide cast of characters that you bring on. So like when you're looking to bring on guests, what do you are you just looking to talk to interesting people? What's your I guess what do you look for when you look for a guest?
Yeah, no, I mean it's not just always interesting people. Sometimes it's like, okay, like when I spoke to Justin O'Donnell, I really didn't know much about Justin before we spoke, but I knew he was big in the liberty movement, and I'm like, well, my listeners might want to hear from this guy,
Mm-hmm.
But then there are some people that I like when I interviewed the Huntsman about supply chains, I'm like, some people are going to learn something here, like this is important information. Like what's going on with the supply chain for the last year is why are there meat shortages? Why are there toilet paper shortages? What's happening with the supply chain? So that, you can get information out of it, and then I don't know. I guess the person has to have a certain type of mindset, a certain type of a certain type of persona. I don't want somebody that comes across like smug, because if you come across smug, I don't want to talk to you probably. And so I want to talk to people that I think we can produce an interesting conversation, that have interesting things to say, that I can learn something from, my audience can learn something from, and we can bounce ideas off of each other. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that helps narrow it down, but
well, I think the way you do your interviews, and the one I was talking about is Ghost Jail with Birdo.
Oh yeah,
who I'd never heard of, but that was a super interesting conversation. But yeah, I like how you talk about not bringing on smug people. I will say I have brought on smug people and will continue to. But what I try to do is I try to take the smugness out of them. And I've had people tell me after I interview them. These are people that have been interviewed on cable news or whatever. Like, no one's ever asked me these questions before. I'm like, well, that's because you really haven't been interviewed. You've been just on these little 5-minute segments on cable news.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I got the biggest compliment the other day. We were talking about Scott earlier. I'm just going to bring him up one more time. But when he did that podcast with Pete and they brought up Year Zero and he introduced Year Zero, he said, oh, and we can't forget Tommy, everybody's friend. And yeah. I'm like, I love that. Like, that's how I want it to be. I want people to be relaxed talking to me on my podcast. I feel like I do my podcast for blue collar guys. Like I'm a blue collar guy. I'm like, what do I want to listen to? If I were like working a construction site on my way home, what would make me listen to a podcast? And it's not somebody preaching philosophy and theory and all these obscure abstract ideas. I want some solid information. And so that's really my goal, is to find people that have solid information that listeners can utilize.
Dude, that right there, what you just said, I mean, that could be the most important point in a podcasting course is make a podcast that you want to listen to. So many people try to recreate other podcasts and they want to recreate Tom Woods, and you're just wasting your time, and you're never going to grow a following trying to do that. That is so important. Glad you brought that up. I did want to, so you were talking about, we're just going to weave all over the place here, but you just talked about.
I can talk about anything. Let's do it.
The supply chain and the toilet paper shortages. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that. So I haven't heard your take on that. So yeah, lay it on us. What happened when COVID hit and we couldn't get toilet paper?
Well, what ultimately happened when COVID hit is countries around the world locked down and nobody was producing anything. There were nobody was manufacturing. The freight that truckers were moving was product that already existed. So as time wore on, you ended up getting these shortages within the warehouses because nobody was manufacturing, because all the manufacturing all over the world was shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so this caused what you would call a shortage.
Yeah.
and
It's those damn price gougers.
yeah, absolutely. But no, and so as production started ramping up, then you started seeing it even out. But the problem was that you had all this meat that was sitting, this livestock that was sitting out on these farms that were due for slaughter 6 months ago. And there weren't enough trucks and freight liners to move the product. So they ended up having to kill a lot of the livestock. And so as they were having to kill
it and not use it.
Yeah, especially the pigs. There were
Wow.
There were lots of stories going around that they were just shooting them. They couldn't do anything with them. They couldn't move the product. They would slaughter them, but there would be nobody to move the meat. Right?
Just because they have their process of moving new pigs in and old pigs out, and
what they did is they moved truckers. Like, see, this is what happens with central planning. They moved all the truck drivers from their normal everyday routes onto moving medical supplies. And then whenever there were shortages, like in toilet paper, they started flooding the toilet paper market with truckers that didn't normally run toilet paper, which is what I typically do. I run paper products. I run for Georgia Pacific. And then, so you had all these guys that had never done this before I spoke to hundreds of them during a 3-month period, trying to tell them this is how you have to check into this place. This is how they operate. This is what you have to do. But they had never done it before. So by the time these meat drivers got back around on their reefer trucks back to hauling meat, well, they had to murder a bunch of fucking animals because they didn't have anyone to move the product. So as they were trying to maneuver around and they were trying to strategically move truckers by government edict, then they were creating shortages in other areas.
Well, wasn't there also an aspect to it of, you have your commercial supply chain, well, like with toilet paper or also with restaurants. You have your commercial supply chain supplying your restaurants and your office buildings and all that shit with toilet paper and food. You have your residential supply chain that's supplying your grocery stores and things like that. And you had your commercial supply chain. Basically, all the demand for that toilet paper stopped because everyone was taking the shit at home, and there wasn't enough toilet paper in the grocery stores because it was just, I guess, the point is they can't just, people think that you can just flip a supply chain and say, okay, let's take all the toilet paper from the office buildings and make it go in the grocery stores. You can't really do that. No,
you can't. And see, that was the issue. It comes back to the knowledge problem, right? They're trying to, they're operating by reacting to the current issue, not understanding that they're creating another issue down the road. And so every time you would see this shift in the freight and where the truckers were being moved and how they were being worked, they were creating another issue on the other side of the supply chain. And now we're looking at a situation because we haven't completely recovered from it. China is still trying to make up for all the lost time they had because they shut down all their major manufacturing hubs coming out of China. So the reason that you haven't seen you can't get microchips and shit like this, they keep talking about there's a shortage of microchip because China shut it all down, everything shut down. They weren't working at all for months. And then when they kicked back on, they started overproducing, trying to catch up, and they're trying to catch up on the on the shipping side, on the supply chain side. But you're looking at least, from what my buddy the Huntsman said, you're looking at least 18 months before we get caught up. And that's barring natural disasters. There's a pending longshoreman strike in 2022 that could slow everything down. So you could be looking 2.5 years of dealing with the supply chain broken, like never being up to par, for the next 2 to 3 years.
Right.
And so this is why we can move kind of into the agorism from this, because this is the stuff I've been looking at saying, hey man, like, I don't care if you're going to go vote one day every two years. Fine. Go vote one day every 2 years. I don't care. It doesn't bother me one bit. What are you doing the rest of the time to hedge your bets? How are you assuring that you and your family are okay? That's what's important right now, because we have a system in which we're staring down the barrel of financial collapse, and we have a broken supply chain. They're printing more money than ever, and we have less products than ever. This is not going to be good for anybody. So what are you doing to hedge your bets? Like,
so what steps should people be taking in their lives right now to hedge their bets?
I mean, get a fishing license, learn to fish. Like, you can do stuff like that. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be something crazy.
Or wouldn't it be true agorism, not get the license and just fish?
Well, that's what I do, but I have a pond on my yard. See, I have a stocked pond in my backyard.
Yeah.
So it's like, I go catch fish when I want to. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
That's nice.
But you take the risk you're willing to take. I'm not going to tell you not to go spend the $40 on a fishing license if you want to go spend the $40 on a fishing license.
Right.
That's all up to you. You take whatever risks you're willing to take. But, just grow you some vegetables, just some. Maybe something that you can jar and preserve and save. Like, just do something to help yourself, because if you're not doing anything, then you're still dependent on this broken system that we have no idea if it'll ever get fixed,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just expanded my garden with this in mind, and also I live up in Pennsylvania, so not down in Texas. It does get cold up here, but I found this really cool setup by watching YouTube videos, which I learned everything about gardening. And I'm going to try it this winter. I did it in the spring. Used it as like a little greenhouse to start my seeds, where you can it's basically just PVC pipe that you build a frame over a raised bed, and you can have big raised beds with it, and put hinges on it, handles, bring it up and down. I have a small one right now. I'm going to build a bigger one, and you can actually grow vegetables, grow lettuce, grow things like that in the winter. You can have snow on top of there. Go out there, brush it off. It'll grow. It's a greenhouse. So
yeah,
there's a lot of cool things you can do.
Yeah, and you just have to start thinking about, like, I'm not interested in telling people how to implement agorism in their lives. Like, the way I look at agorism is anarchy in motion, right? It's like, if you've come to the idea that I'm a philosophical anarchist, then agorism is your next step. Like, that is the step you have to take care of your family and create anarchy as much as possible in your own life. I mean, we all understand that 90% of our lives are lived in pure anarchy. The very few times we have to intersect with the state is when it's not anarchy. But the fact of the matter is, if you can create even more space between yourself and the state and separate yourself even more, then you're doing yourself and your family a justice in getting yourself in a secure location. So I don't have any complaints with those that want to vote. I'm not one of those agorists. I'm looking at it going, what you still need to be, if you can't take care of yourself, then how are you going to help anybody else? Like, and that's the number one thing. You see what I'm saying? Oh,
absolutely. I look at it, you're basically, trying to cut the tentacles of the state away from you that have, latched on. And whatever way you can do that, I 100% agree with that. That's a smart thing to do. Along that line, though, is there a point in time when you really need to leave the country, try to find a more free place than the United States of America?
If your name's Vin Armani.
Get your shit and go.
Yeah. And you know what? That's fine. You know, for some people, I don't have that. I don't have that luxury. It's just, to me,
not many people do. Yeah.
Yeah. And my, number one, I don't have that kind of money to just pick up and go and be okay. You know what I'm saying? I would have to grind and struggle, and I'm sure I can make it, but it wouldn't be any better than living in the US right now, as far as I'm concerned. Number two, I have 5 kids and a granddaughter that I'm not willing to just leave, you know, so it's, I think that's something that every person has to weigh for themselves. For some people, that's an okay solution, but for me, I just don't look at it as a feasible solution, you know?
Yeah, I think for people, maybe single people or people who maybe have a lot of money and can afford to just pick up and move, it's easier. Or if you're willing to, some people are willing to take on more risk and they're not worried about the uncertainty of it. And fine, I mean, I understand people, working towards leaving the United States right now, and honestly, it might be the best call if people are able to do it. But at the same time, United States, the problems that it has at this point in time, there's not a lot of countries, I think, that when you weigh things, everything that's happening, that are a lot better. With that being said, I think things in the U.S. could easily get a lot worse pretty quickly, as we've seen happen with the lockdowns. They can happen almost overnight. You can have things shut down. So, like you're saying, the more you can kind of shield yourself from those things, the better it is. That's probably the best first step, and maybe ultimately work your way towards the point where, if you have to, you are able to get your shit and go. But yeah. I mean, I'm not throwing shade at Vin. I'm a big fan of Vin Armani, and plan on taking his Bitcoin course. We're trying to get a group of Lions of Liberty Pride members. We have almost enough to do his Bitcoin course. So if anyone listening to this wants in, and if you're in the Pride, you can sign up for, it's a huge discount. It's even more of a discount than he's offering it to the public. Or you can join the Pride and do it. You can join for just $5 and save like $75, something like that. But quick plug there.
No, I'm not throwing shade at Vin either. I think what he did was remarkable, and in some ways I'm kind of jealous of him, because I used to always tell my wife, I was like, man, whenever I'm done paying child support, we're going to take what money we got. We're going to go down to Mexico, to Cabo San Lucas. We're going to build a little bar on a beach with an apartment over it. And we're just going to chill out, man. And we're going to serve alcohol and hang out on the beach all year long. And I'm like, he kind of did that, So no, I'm a little jealous, but I do feel like my situation, it would be a little selfish of me to turn around and sell my property and then take that money and scramble whenever my property may be the only place of refuge my kids or my parents have to go.
Yeah. Life's complicated, man. There's
absolutely.
A lot of things to go into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of things that are complicated, I want to talk to you about messaging. And right now, and people are going to be listening to this a week from now. So this is June 8th. They'll be listening whenever. I don't know, the 17th, 15th, whatever that is.
17th.
Yeah. The hot topic is the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire talking about getting rid of child labor laws, which I don't have a problem with the tweet. I think it was a great tweet because it really highlighted, you're talking about, yes, get rid of child labor laws, and you're calling out the horrendous public education system in the same tweet. Putting those things together draws attention to it. So when you think about messaging and what ways we can draw people into this movement, draw people, into thinking for themselves, into, having that agorist mindset, what do you try to do with your messaging?
Well, first of all, Twitter is not for messaging, man.
Yes, it is. Donald Trump.
No,
Donald Trump won an election on Twitter.
No, these people that are like, well, that's just fucking shitty messaging, you know. And it's like, dude, Twitter is not where you write a damn essay. Okay, this is like short, punchy. You got to catch people's attention. Like, this isn't where you're really like getting your message across. You know what I'm saying? But so there was nothing wrong with the tweet. When I was 9 years old, I was mowing yards. My son, when he was 14 years old, would try to go around and get his neighbors to let him mow their yard. Every one of them said, no, it's illegal.
What?
Yeah, there's something wrong when a cop shuts down a little girl's lemonade stand on the damn sidewalk. So that, like, this tweet, I felt like was fine. I see nothing wrong with this damn tweet. Okay, so but Twitter is not made for messaging. Twitter is made for exactly what happened with that tweet. It's made for things to go viral and catch people's attention and ask questions. That's what it's made for. So before we move on messaging, let's just get it out of the way. Twitter is not where you go to message.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah. It's just to add to that. Yeah, it's like it's like the gate to messaging. You want to draw people in. You know, maybe they don't agree with you 100%, but there's what's that guy talking about? That's kind of interesting. I haven't heard anyone talk like that. Let's see, let's listen to this podcast, or check out this article. And it's not like you want to always be hyperbolic and say. I think a lot of people run into issues trying to be Donald Trump, trying to use that type of aggressive messaging style. It doesn't work for everybody, and I think a lot of people sort of get in their own way doing it. It's people don't give Trump enough credit. And politics aside, policy aside, Trump was a disaster. But Trump's ability to move the conversation and dictate what people were talking about, it's unmatched. I don't think anybody that I've ever seen in this, at least in this day and age, social media day and age, could just move the conversation wherever the hell they wanted to. That's what Twitter's for, moving the conversation around. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And not everybody can be a Pete Quinones. Not everybody can be, Nick, the individualist. Like these guys, they kind of, number one, like Nick, he's younger, so he gets that. He understands Twitter. Like, I get on there and I say something and I'm like, okay, 3 people liked it. That's damn near viral for me, so, but yeah, no. So you're right that it's a certain type of mindset that really understands how to utilize Twitter properly. And I've not seen any of these Libertarian Party affiliates find the right person. Maybe Kentucky's pretty good, but Texas. They invited Kentucky invited the Lions of Liberty already to speak at their next convention. So they are my favorite affiliate by far already.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I told Beatrix, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go on Lions of Liberty. I'm going to be on Finding Freedom with John. And she goes, was he at Childeberg? I was like, no. She goes, why are you talking to him?
Yeah, not in the club, not in the Childeberg club. I'm jealous.
She found her fucking in-group, dude, and she's not going to let go.
Did you get to meet Howie Snowden from Lions of Liberty? Did he run into you down there?
I didn't.
You didn't? Bearded guy? No? There's probably lots of beards down there.
There were quite a few beards, yeah.
Including stumbling around, sleeping in behind a tree. You didn't see anyone like that?
It sounds like every bearded guy that was there.
No, we have Howie spoke highly of Childeberg as well. It had a great time.
If I did meet you, Howie, I apologize. I don't remember the name Howie. I probably recognize your face though. So please don't take it personal.
Everybody loves Howie. Like you were saying before, how you want to be known as, Tommy's everybody's friend. That's like Howie's like our representative of Lions of Liberty. That everybody loves Howie. Yeah. But to talk about Childeberg. So was that your first really like?
Did you want to do the messaging first?
Oh shit! Yeah, let's finish that. Messaging, yeah. So Twitter, we understand what Twitter is. What messaging? Let's talk about when you're working on messaging, when you're crafting an article, or when you're thinking about direction of your podcast. How do you message?
My main thing is I'm trying to look at what the average Joe can grab onto, right? I don't need to get bogged down in philosophy. What I need to make the guy who's doing side jobs, like for his buddies, working for cash under the table on the weekend, just so he can keep his electricity turned on. So he understands that he's doing exactly what I'm saying you should be doing, right? And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to boost the confidence of the blue collar, of those people that are doing this work without knowing the work they're doing, right? I made a joke probably 100 times at Childeberg that Beatrix, my wife, is more of an agorist than I am. She's never read a word of philosophy, and she's not interested in it at all because of the way she goes about her business. If we never knew the word agorism, she would still be living the majority of her life as an agorist because that's her way her mind works, right? So what we have to do is we have to understand that there are the shade tree mechanics, the fruit stand guy on the side of the road. They are free. This is freedom they are expressing in this act that they are doing. So what we have to do is we have to relate to what they are doing because that's the majority of the population. Talking all this highbrow stuff is only going to attract more highbrow, waspy, bourgeois, beltway libertarians. Right. That's not the people that we're trying to attract. We're trying to attract the everyman. And how do you attract the everyman? You got to speak that everyman's language. So how do you go about attracting them is by engaging them where they're at and talking to them about the operations, the counter economic activities that they're already participating in. Now, if they want to continue to participate in the political process, I don't have an issue with that. And I've even said this to Tho Bishop, like straight up, even though I'm an agorist, if locally I look at my local political contest and I'm saying, okay, this guy is a Tho Bishop type of politician who defends, normalizes, and makes, actually like uplifts agorism, whereas this other person wants to tax and regulate the shit out of me for selling eggs out of my backyard, I'm going to vote because that's self-defense. I'm going to vote. If the Texas referendum would have made it through the committee and I would have fucking voted. I would have gone and registered to vote just so I could vote for Texas to secede from the union. I don't see any reason why agorists have to be so, bogged down. Now, nationally, I'll probably never vote nationally, ever. You'll probably never get me to vote for Senate or president or anything like that. But locally, with like in the town of 2000 I live in, my voice actually makes some sort of difference there. You know what I'm saying? So why not? Why not get involved?
Yeah, you made a lot of great points there. One thing you said at the beginning, which I try to do this, reinforce to people that what you're doing is the right thing. When I meet people who are doing side jobs, like my brother-in-law is a plumber, and him and his plumber friends, they're always doing side jobs, always working to get extra money, and that is, that's the American dream right there. I mean, being able to use your skills, use what you know to turn that into, food for your family, to turn that into a vacation, to turn that into, buying a house or whatever you want, or leaving the country, whatever you want to do. And for so long, like that type of stuff was frowned on. Even entrepreneurship, people don't realize this, like entrepreneurship being put on a pedestal is very new. It's like new in the last 10 years. Prior to that, people would look down on entrepreneurs. And it's good that's changing. it's kind of good and bad, because you have a lot of people who just kind of say they're entrepreneurs now when they're not really doing anything. But and there's also a lot of people who are entrepreneurs who don't really have a business. They just have seed money and don't make a profit, and that's a whole different issue altogether. But that's the Federal Reserve, so we could pivot to that. But before we get into talking, because I do want to talk about inflation, I got a list here, a couple of things I did want to talk to you about. I want to come back to Childerberg, and you were talking about, your wife was asked, why are you talking to that guy? It wasn't a Childerberg. Why is everyone saying that Childerberg was this great experience? What was it about Childerberg that made it so special?
All right, I'm going to attack this question from two different angles here. I'm going to attack it from my wife's point of view first, and then I will tell you from my point of view what I experienced. So from my wife's point of view, my wife is anti-political. She wants nothing to do it, which I love that, because when I go home on the weekend, I'm no longer in this truck. I'm not listening to podcasts. I'm not talking about this stuff. I'm not thinking about this stuff. I'm focused on our house, our property, our goals together, where we're going, how we're accomplishing this. So she was concerned. She almost backed out of going 2 weeks before the event. It was like, maybe I shouldn't go. And her concern was everybody there was going to just be talking philosophy and theory and blah, 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 politics, yada, yada, yada. I don't want to hear it. I said, oh, baby, it's not going to be like that. I promise. And she's like, okay. So finally, I talked her into going, and she came with me, and she had more fun there than she's had in years. I mean, just had an insane amount of fun. She made biltong, which is kind of like jerky. It's South African. Mm-hmm. Kind of like jerky. It's dehydrated meat, red meat, and everybody devoured it. Everybody wanted the recipe. And she couldn't have been happier to share some South African heritage with everybody. Yeah. So that just made the day for her. Like, she just had an entire blast, loved everybody. And from my perspective, I went there thinking, this is going to be really cool. I keep telling Carl I'm going to come to Childerberg and hang out. I got to go. And so finally, Childerberg 3, I show up. And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be cool. We're going to have a good time. And I'm absolutely blown away. Not just by camping, because I love camping. I was born in southern Louisiana, so, sleeping outside is second nature to me. But the people, just the youth especially, was probably the biggest white pill, meeting Ace, Cotton, Agora Brewing, Cody. Who else was there? Nick was there, Bird. Just all these young guys that are mid-20s at best. And J-Dog, I'm not going to say his real name because I don't know if he wants it said, but J-Dog was there. I think he's J-Dog 13 on Twitter.
So does everyone go by their Twitter names when you're in person, or do they go by their real names?
Well, I mean, I only called Bird because that's what I knew him by. So it just made it easy for me. I called Cotton because that's what I knew him by. I called Ace because that's what I knew him by. So I'm trying to I'm the worst with names. So it's just whatever. This is easy for me to remember. Now, if they were going by other names elsewhere, whatever, not my business. But no, I did not go by Tommy Salmons. I went by Tommy. No, and so, yeah, it was just a huge white pill. Just meeting these guys and being around them and seeing this next generation of kids coming up in the movement. And I was talking to Eric from Rebel with a Cause the other day, and I was like, I'm an Xer. I'm Gen X. Like, I grew up, I didn't care about politics. I had no desire to know anything about politics. I didn't want anything to do with politics. My whole generation was kind of like the last of the latchkey kids. And so we were all just kind of like, leave us alone, let us do our thing. And it wasn't until I saw politics start to step into my everyday life that I was like, whoa, wait a second. I gotta figure out what the hell's going on here. Started getting involved. That was my late 30s, early 40s. These kids were teenagers after 9/11, right? So their entire mindset is this intrusive, gargantuan federal government. So they are so much better read at 25 years old than even I am today, because they've been trying to figure this shit out their entire lives. Whereas it didn't hit me until, like I hit about 40 years old, and I was like, hey, wait. What happened here?
But yeah. Plus, yeah. So they're getting they're getting this indoctrination too in the schools. I mean, when you think about like just something like the TSA, like they don't know of a time when there was no TSA. When you just, walked through a metal detector, went back to your gate, got on your plane, anybody could come back with you, wave to you as you get on the plane. I mean, that's not even something that's in their mind, which is crazy to even think about. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you there.
No, that's fine. I'm just saying being so impressed by those guys, and and I've been on Slurp Gang twice since then, and like just having a blast with these guys and just loving getting to know them. And I'm so looking forward to the next 20 years of libertarian thought, because these guys that I've met, and I know like how brilliant they are. And some of them are working on books, and I'm just so excited for them and what's happening with these guys. And then there were 250 people that went through Childeberg, whether they were there the entire time or they, they were there for, like Buck Johnson showed up. He was there for, I don't know, a little while on, I got to talk to him and hang out with him, but he didn't stay. It was Memorial Weekend. A lot of people had other things to do. Robbie Bernstein, he was in and out a couple of times. So, but it was like 250 people through, and not a bad person, not one bad person. Every single person was kind and loving and just considerate and, full of smiles and laughs. And we were just had such a good time. But no, I had been getting really, really jaded over society, over the people of society, the way they were reacting to the lockdowns. And just being around like-minded people was just so, and not being around the everyday, Karen, please put your mask on, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've experienced the same thing when we had that Mises Take Human Action Bash, I think it was called, last month up here. Dave Smith and Scott Horton spoke right before the Pennsylvania Libertarian Convention. And same thing. I mean, walk in a room, 350, 400 people, nobody's wearing a mask. People are all happy. Everyone's kind, having, and not just like highbrow conversations, also just joking around, having fun. But yeah, you could find some intellectual conversations too, if you wanted to. And you could also find people making dick jokes if you wanted to do that. But it was just cool. Like, yeah, just like you were saying, after this year of, I still am to a certain extent, because I know there's a lot of people who are responsible for and bought into what happened the past year, and they're still in positions of power. But yeah, it's great to see so many people, and especially young people, who get it. And yeah, I got to be honest, I wasn't prepared to see the amount of young people come out and be excited about this message right now. I was concerned, when I heard, Dave Smith thinking about running. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if there's enough people out there to really make this happen. And after seeing his speech last month, and seeing the energy and being in that room, and it's exciting. Not only from just like a political aspect, talking about voting, not voting federally. I don't. People can do whatever they want to. I don't really care. But just seeing the energy behind the movement, and like you were talking about, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. We're not going to elect a libertarian president. So using politics, using whatever platforms we have to spread this message is all about just getting it in front of more people, so they can then implement agorism, implement the ideas of liberty in their own lives, and start their own thing. So I'm definitely optimistic for the future with what I've seen recently. And now that every libertarian has a podcast, we are sure to win. But a couple more things.
Well, and you gotta
go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to add to the point that you were making there. Is I look at my kids, right? So my kids, I have 5 kids. They range from 16 years old to 21 years old, or 22. He's 22. He'll be 23 this year. Jesus, I'm getting old. So they all speak of libertarianism. None of them are political in any way, but they say if I'm anything, I'm a libertarian. Like just naturally, just like my youngest son, he doesn't even know anything about politics, and he's the most agorist person I've ever met in my life. I mean, just the way he goes. He couldn't get those lawn jobs, mowing lawns around his neighborhood. So what did he do? He went to the convenience store. He spent $100 of his birthday money on candy and went and sold it for $2 a candy bar to kids around the neighborhood. I mean, he's just like, whatever, I'm going to do whatever I got to do. And he ended up buying a vending machine this year. I'm like, look at you, man. Wow. Like just natural awesome. Entrepreneur, 16 years old. Like, go for it, brother. Like, I ain't holding you back, So the fact that I already saw it with my own kids, and to see that it's not just my kids, to see that there are other young people that have the same mindset, that are thinking the exact same ways, I'm like, that is so awesome.
Mm-hmm. I think it probably has something to, I think there's a lot of factors, but one of the factors that just popped in my head. I mean, people shit on, the younger generations for always wanting instant gratification, because, I mean, the way that you and I were raised, when we wanted to watch TV, for an example, or we wanted to listen to the radio, we just watched whatever was on TV. We just listened to what was on the radio. Maybe you called in and you requested a song. Today, kids, they want to listen to a song. They can pull it up, listen to that song right then. They can listen to a specific part of a song over and over again if they want to. They can make their own playlist right away. They don't have to, turn on a radio station and wait for the song and hit record at the start and the end in order to make a mixtape.
Right.
So having that power just on simple things like that, I think as a young person, you probably start to think, well, what else can I get under my control? Why is this done this way and why isn't it done this way? And you start to kind of deconstruct society. And I would imagine that plays a small role into what's happening, which is awesome if that's actually the case.
Yeah, I think for us it was our parents that did it to us. That were like, all right, y'all go, get out of the fucking house until it's dark, and then come back and eat dinner. And so we were always off on our own, doing our own thing all day long. And for them, it's just like, well, I can control this much of my life. Why can't I control this much more of my life? Yeah, I think that's a good, way of looking at it.
That's pretty cool. Well, Tommy, there was more I wanted to talk about, but I think we're out of time. And I wasted the first 15 minutes, but oh well. Those things happen in podcasting. You live and you learn. Even after almost 300 episodes, I still make mistakes. But I wanted to give you a chance, just talk about where people can find your podcast, why they should listen, and where else, where they can find everything else you're working on and follow you on social media.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, like anytime you want to have me back on, if you want to chat again, I completely enjoyed this. I will always make time to come on here and chat with you. Like, don't ever hesitate to reach out. But yeah, if you want to find me, go to libertarianinstitute.org/year-0. That is my podcast. Every once in a while, once in a blue moon, maybe once every 6 months, I finally finish a damn article. It's hard out here when I'm out on the road, but I do try to write. I do have a Substack, but really it's just my podcast for the most part. Every now and then, stories are not political. They are horror or psychological thriller.
You just cut out there for that last sentence. If you want to start that up, when you were talking about your Substack, and then it cut out.
Yeah, on my Substack, I publish all my interviews, all my podcasts, but I also write. I also have some short stories that I release there that I've written over the years, and they're not political at all. They're horror or psychological thriller.
Nice.
And yeah, at TD Salmons on Twitter. It's pretty much the only social media I jack with anymore. I got off Facebook, and I still have an account there just in case my wife gets in an argument. I can go back her up, but for the most part, I don't mess around with Facebook anymore.
All right, Tommy, thank you for coming on the show, man. This was fun.
Enjoyed it, man. I always enjoy talking to you.
Hope you all enjoyed that interview on Finding Freedom. Another awesome guest. And hopefully you guys also have subscribed to the Lions of Liberty podcast, and you're getting all 3 of our unique shows in your little listening device delivered to your ears. If you haven't, please do that. Just go to your app, you know how to do it, and subscribe. You can also leave us a 5-star review and a nice comment. We would prefer if you did it on Apple Podcasts, but anywhere you can on the internet, please leave us a positive comment. Also, if you want to support us, we would love that too. Please go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. You can support us for as little as a couple bucks, or if you get in at a higher level, you get merchandise and access to us, and all the way up to you can advertise on the show or get to even produce a show. So check it all out, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please consider checking out the Lions of Liberty store, where we have some awesome t-shirts. We have a Taxation is Death t-shirt with an awesome design. We have a Wax On, Tax Off t-shirt. And we're always coming up with new ideas and adding new t-shirt designs to the store. Check that out at lionsofliberty.store. And if you're in the Pride, you get a discount on anything you buy in the store. So you do both of those things and you win. That's all I got, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.